is Waylyn Hobbs, the Deputy Mayor of the Village of Hempstead. As Trustee Don Ryan said earlier, we welcome you to the Village of Hempstead. When we talk about the Village of Hempstead, and I was listening to some of the numbers, in the Village of Hempstead, we have a close to 30% of the rent stabilized apartment in out Nassau County. And not only do we have, in my opinion, a high number of rent stabilized apartments, but we also have a high number of pilots. And many of the buildings in the Village of Hempstead receive pilots. And these pilots that they receive is supposed to be to improve the buildings and also offer job employment for the residents of the Village of Hempstead, which we really don't see that much. And so with that in mind, we would want you to keep in mind that since the Hempstead has such a large proportion of people that are already in rent stabilized apartment, close to 30%. I think we have close to 3,800 something rent stabilized apartments. So that affects a lot of our residents in the Village of Hempstead who's already suffering from hard times. And again, with the pilot programs that we have already that these apartments receive, I ask that you would consider that when you consider your increase. Thank you. Yes.
This is something that our board has talked about for many years and seen for many years, is the conditions of some of the apartment buildings in Hempstead. And I was just wondering if the building department has been active about going after owners.
Absolutely.
Especially after the fires in some of the rent stabilization.
Absolutely. We've hired an additional 6 building inspectors to the inspectors that we already have to address not only the fire safety issues, but I'm also a volunteer firefighter in the Village of Hempstead. So I know what it is to go into some of these buildings, and there are legal apartments that they take a studio apartment and have changed it to a 3-bedroom apartment, and the landlords know about it, they collect the money and not doing anything about it. Yes, we're interested.
I just did that as a sidebar, because I know that's something that we've talked about as a board for quite a while, and how we made the different guidelines for Hempstead in the past.
You're welcome.
Mr. Mayor, before you sit, sir.
Sure.
Deputy Mayor. Mr. Stein brought up earlier the topic of the SCREET program. Could you address that as to why the Village of Hempstead has not brought that forward for many, many years?
Hempstead does participate in the SCREET program. I don't have the exact numbers, but we do. So it's not true that we don't. We do.
I didn't say that you don't. I just said that it's not spoken about too much. And one of the particular landlords mentioned to me that he applied for the SCREET program and he couldn't get anything, and nothing really happened. My question is, if you don't have the numbers, fine, but through the years, I've only heard some of the tenant members talk about, obviously, the protecting of the senior citizens, which we all want to do. They always seem to balance it on the backs of the landlords. And then when I asked about the SCREET program, most of the municipalities, and I understand even Hempstead going back a couple of years, really wasn't very active in that. So my question was, for balance and fairness, that's something that really can affect the senior citizens. And that was my approach.
Absolutely, and again, my answer is that we do participate in the SCREET program. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Catherine Gary or Harry?
Good evening. My name is Catherine Gary. I live in Rockville Center. I am very familiar with the housing situation here in the community of Hempstead, where I resided for some 10 years in the apartment building at 600 Fulton. During that time, the building was not properly taken care of, and we had to do a lot of work to advocate for improvements in the building. And it creates, when you have landlords who are very reticent to use whatever reserve funds they might have, or that even that they're required to have, to proper repairs. It creates an attitude amongst the tenants who try to advocate for better care of the buildings. And it leaves a lot of people very discontent, feeling no matter what you do, these landlords do not respond because they just really don't care. And that was my experience while I lived there. And I recently had the opportunity to visit that building, and I was really quite shocked to see how it even had gone down, even in the time that I hadn't been living there. It was bad at the first time, but now when they replaced the front entrance, the entrance now looks like a prison. And however it might have cost, it shows the attitude of the owner that it's kind of insulting to have that type of an entrance to your building. I also noticed that on the B floor where I was visiting, the floors in the hallways, is obvious that the landlord does not care how and to what degree the floors are cleaned. What they do is they just push the dirt to the sides. So if you look down the side of each of the halls, you just see this line of dirt. It's like so disgraceful. That's not the way you clean. And this particular landlord is one of the ones that recently received a pilot. Well, actually, it's a few years ago, but there was a great protest from the tenants that lived there that he should not receive a pilot, and he received it anyway, and he was supposed to put in new kitchens and bathrooms and all things like that, and he actually got some agencies to testify that he was a wonderful landlord when he had a history at 67 Terrace Avenue of a totally decrepit building. So this is what happens in Hempstead. I've been around here a long time, like 20 years, and I have seen this kind of thing in so many instances. There was also a fire in one of the buildings where 2 people lost their lives, and there were all kinds of violations, and there was, charges brought against Mr. Mott, I believe it was the owner, a long-term landlord in the community of Hempstead who always kept his buildings in bad shape. And I remember a few years back also, there was a building complex where for a whole year there was no heat in the building. Children going to school, having to stay in cold apartments. So I'm here to appeal for the tenants that Hempstead should be given a special category. I know you've done that in the past. And one wonders why Hempstead has to have such a history of neglect by certain landlords. And you have to start to think it has to do with the African American and Hispanic heritage of the tenants. That's what I think is the problem. And this cannot be allowed to continue. Now, as far as the rents that landlords are claiming that the rents, certain people stay forever and so their rents don't go up very much. Well, that's first of all a question of the law, and if that is a problem, they need to address getting the law changed if it's such a serious problem. Secondly, I know that in these buildings in Hempstead, there's a lot of turnover. So while there may be some people who have the advantage of the low rents from not moving, there's a lot of turnover in these buildings, and when there is turnover, that's exactly the time that the landlords are able to raise the rents. So while there have been figures here for apartments with low rents, I'm sure in these buildings there are apartments with very high rents too, and they're having to live in these substandard conditions. So I think that you need to keep that in mind and make a special category for Hempstead and whatever any other community that faces the same thing. And again, do a no increase. increase. And I believe that while there's been a bit of an economic upturn, I just was over at Roosevelt Field, and you would think it was Christmas time. There's so many people over there spending their money. But I don't think it wasn't the people of Hempstead that were over there spending their money, because there's so many people that are on such low incomes. And I know also that the cost of food has kind of skyrocketed. You don't hear much about it. When I go to the supermarket, I can't believe how much I have to spend on food. So what happens is, you're going to raise rents, then people are going to have less money for food. And what happens then is they eat the worst kind of food for them, and then you get obesity and all kinds of health problems that skyrocket. So there's a lot of implications to this. I hope that you will keep this in mind and do a very conservative increase, if you do increase at all. The ideal thing would be a zero.